Bill Gustin here with Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Department Training Division, Special Projects, with Darryl Liggins, Dan Shaw, Chief Dan Shaw, and our good brother, Captain Sam Hittle. And we represent different regions of the country. I'm from Southeast Florida, originally from Chicago. Darryl's from Oakland, California, out on the West Coast. Dan is in the Washington Beltway, and Sam is in America's heartland. And we're all glad to have you. Our topic today is going to be the role and the mindset of the second engine. In other words, the role of the second engine and the mindset of the officer of the second engine company. Before that, I want to give out some shout outs. This is November 11th. This is Veterans Day. A lot of us have the day off because of, in memory of the people that have made this country safe and kept our democracy and our freedoms and have made such tremendous sacrifices for us. And for me, I never spent any time in the service. I know my dad was a World War II veteran, but everyone today, thank a vet. It is why we enjoy the freedoms that we have and all the confusion that's going on right now in this country. It's a mess, but at least it's our mess. It's our mess. We're allowed to make that mess. And because we still live in a democracy, thanks to our veterans. I want to give a shout out to our partner here that is not here today. My partner is Mike D. Mike Dugan, FDNY, retired ladder 123. Mike is participating in a neighborhood Veterans Day ceremony. I think they're placing some bricks at a memorial with veterans' names on it. And he told me he wouldn't be here. I said, that's where you need to be, Captain Mike. So a big shout out to him. I also want to thank, I've been doing some research on my job, and I reach out to guys that I think are consummate subject matter experts when it comes to nozzles or hose or whatever I happen to be looking into at the time. This happened to be hose, so I reached out to my friends at Key. That's keyfire.com. Longtime friends, Mark Lighthill, who used to be a assistant chief with Brevard County, Florida, what they call the Florida State Coast, and Dave Hibben from 10 Engine in DC. And Dan Shaw, I think that's probably as busy as you get, isn't it?
They're up there. They carried that mantle for many years.
Yeah. So Dave paid his dues, and but those two guys, what gentlemen! And they're not out to sell you hose. They're brother firefighters that didn't forget where they came from. So I want to give a shout out to my buddies at Key. They're great guys and they're good firefighters. Then I'm going to give a shout out. I just had a wonderful experience this weekend, yesterday and today. I was asked to teach a Florida specific class to the fire departments on what we call our Space Coast, Brevard County, Cape Canaveral, Melbourne, and that area. And what I like to do with my classes is get up a day or two early and make an assessment and ride around with an officer, take pictures, integrate the pictures into my presentation to make it specific to their needs. And so we had the last 2 days, we had firefighters from Palm Bay, Brevard County, Melbourne, Satellite Beach, and Cape Canaveral. And I got great respect for them. The wind coming in off the Atlantic Ocean and off the Banana and what's the other river? The Indian River is awesome. There is no way that they are going to be able to fight a fire in any kind of structure with a frontal attack with that if the fire is on the windward side. So I take my hat off to you guys. And it's not just the wind and structure fires. They have a huge wildland interface fire. And, here I'm coming from a real big fire department. These are smaller departments, but man, they do their share of work. And I take my hat off to these guys, both for structural firefighting and wildland interface. So big shout out to those guys. Darryl, a little bit about yourself, and then we'll move on to Dan.
Well, thank you. Yeah, Darryl Liggins. I think you guys that watch the program know me. I'm a captain in Oakland, California. This is my 28th year in the fire service, which is hard to believe. And I still love this job as much as the day I started. I'm still always trying to learn. And for those listening, as far as always trying to learn, this man right here, Bill Gustin, had nothing but questions to the panelists prior to starting this program. And he does have the most gray hair. I think I have less hair than you, although you have more gray hair.
There's a show. I was using just for men.
And for somebody that surrounds their life and their passion is this occupation and being in a very busy urban area, it goes to show that there's always more for us to learn. How many years you have now in this profession?
47 years. And Darryl, don't be humble. I did have a question, and I had a question for my brother. Sam wasn't on yet, but I had a question for my brother Darryl and Dan. I've got an inquiry from a brother in a northeastern city about how long it takes to fill a dry standpipe and get water and adequate pressure to a remote top floor outlet or roof outlet. How long is it going to take to completely fill this thing, and what are the techniques to be used? No experience. Okay, so what do? This is why networking, for those of you that are watching, this is what we're doing right now, guys. You viewers that are watching us right now, this is what we do on and offline. We network with our buddies. Nobody can know everything, but I know somebody that does know, and all I got to do is pick up a phone or send them an email. And that is what's so wonderful. I love this. So, Darryl, you're a humble guy, but you did give me some great advice. And I think we ought to address this topic of dry standpipes and manual wet standpipes. It could be a topic all of itself. Dan, 2 questions for you. How many, since we last talked, how many apartment complexes have you burnt down in Fairfax County? And how many more bugles have you added to your bag? Dan, those are my 2 questions.
None to both.
Okay.
And thanks for asking. I appreciate your concern.
Yes. Oh, I'm concerned. Sam,
hey, someone has to do it. Hey, no, thanks, Bill. Always a pleasure to be here. Dan Shaw. I'm a deputy chief with Fairfax County Fire and Rescue Department, and also have the privilege of working with a great collective group of firefighters and fire officers at Traditions Training, one being that little fellow down at the bottom, of really having great collective conversation, much like what we're doing right here. And I was also fortunate enough to write 25 to Survive with my brother from another mother, Doug Mitchell, and really looking forward to a great conversation as always.
And Dan, you surround yourself with the likes of Larry Schultz and Ricky Riley. We stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Mr. Sam, Captain Sam, how are we, brother?
I'm good. How you guys doing today?
Okay. Are you on duty, Sam?
No. I came off shift this morning.
Okay. I like the hat, Sam. Like the hat. Sam, did you get yourself back on a ladder company, or are you on the rescue now?
No, I'm fortunate to be a captain on the rescue. Also fortunate to be an instructor with the Real Combat Ready group, Traditions Training.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know how much I'm going to be able to offer to this engine stuff, but
I'm just looking forward to see you break out in hives.
Yeah.
Okay. We shouldn't even have this conversation, but I'm going to bring it up because it's like passing the gas in church. You know you did it, but nobody's too polite to talk about it. And that is, hurry, because Engine 7 is going to beat us into the scene. In other words, who's going to be first in? Who's going to get the first water? Whether you are career or volunteer, we call ourselves professional. There is no place in today's professional fire service for anybody to be in a race or a contest to see who is first due. I always liked being second due because there's many times That first due company with incomplete information spots in the wrong position. Whereas if I stage, keep myself available, then I benefit if there's a mistake made by the first arriving company. You have an entirely different mindset as the officer of the second due engine. And on my way of operating, and I think it's Dan, we've had this discussion offline. I'm thinking first and foremost, does the first due engine have an adequate water supply? So I'm on the mobile computer unit looking for hydrant locations, hearing which way direction that the company did come in terms of them laying a line in or out. Chicago, for instance. When that first arriving company makes an arrival, it doesn't matter what they're on. They will say, we're northbound, we're westbound, because they're a reverse laying fire department. So there's a consideration what the other engine's going to do. Some of the departments, like Chicago, the second engine will back down and then reverse out from the fire scene. So opposite the direction of the first engine. But I find it a fascinating discipline of the mindset and the duties of the second engine. And I've got some questions for you guys, but that's pretty much the way that Miami-Dade operates, unless it is just absolutely a pallet storage yard or a lumber yard. We're going to either forward lay a large diameter hose in. Now, we use a full wave valve. And if it's a smaller residence, we will rely on that second engine to lay us a line. Is there a throw of the dice with that? Sure there is. Sure there is. And when I was first due, I want to know, is engine 7 on the assignment? Where are they responding from? And are they clear of the railroad tracks? And if they're not, that would influence my decision to stop and lay our own line. Now, I don't completely agree with the recent findings from UL that state, do not delay water application on the fire to establish a water supply. Residential fires, yes. The discount auto parts at 4 o'clock in the morning, pushing smoke, black smoke, or the apartment complex well involved that's under construction, you better get yourself a water supply. Any comments? Your thoughts? How do you operate as a second engine in Oakland, Darryl?
Well, you mentioned discipline, and I think that is the most important part. I mean, we're all firefighters, and anybody taking the time to listen to this, podcast, or they want to be on the nozzle. They want to be the point of the spear, as Ray McCormick calls it. They want to be in the fire, and that's where I want to be. That's why I choose to be on the company I'm on, is I want to go to fires. But with that comes discipline. And you have to recognize that at times you're not going to be there. Most people on the fire ground are going to be supporting that nozzle position. And some of those are going to be outside. Some of those are going to be at the hydrant or removing kinks in those unglorious positions. So as a company officer, anybody in Oakland that has worked with me, that if you're new and I haven't worked with you before, I set the tone right at roll call. I tell them what I expect if we're first due, second due, third due, or if we're the RIT company. And I just want to get it out there so there's no confusion there. It's very simple. If we're second due, we're doing everything, and I'll take Dennis Legier's Facebook page name from hydrant to nozzle. We are supporting that first due engine company from the hydrant to the nozzle. I can't have somebody that's just aggressive and wanting to get a piece of the action and going and stretching a second line. One of the most failed, efforts I saw was a second due company going and pulling their own line and not assisting the first engine. And it was just this snowball effect of problems, because the jobs still have to get done. The jobs have to get done, but now it's getting done by other people who have other responsibilities. So if you're second due, be the best second due you can. Don't crowd the nozzle. Take the kinks out of the line, help feed in hose, conserve your air. You may go on air later once it's time to go in there. Make sure they have a water supply. Make sure the first due engineer or pump operator, whatever you call it, is taken care of. And for us, it's a little, well, maybe not unique, maybe a little more unique for a larger city. Our second due officer will often take command until arrival of the battalion chief, because our battalion chiefs have a longer response time. So that's something else we may have to take off the hands of that first due engine. But yeah, bottom line is we are helping as best we can. And the other thing we have to do is tactically, we may not have the first due engine doing what we may think should have been done, or maybe you would have pulled the 2.5 and they pulled an 1 3/4, or maybe you pulled an inch, they pulled an 1 3/4, and you would have gave it a dash with a deck gun first. But whatever they choose to do, we have to support that. We can't be being at odds with what their decision was. So basically, in a nutshell, that's what we're doing, is supporting the first due engine.
Dan, we've had a discussion offline on this. I know you have some pretty strong feelings about that, the role of the second engine, and also the use of the booster tank for an initial attack.
Yeah, and so I'll go back to that. I think Bill Carey always shares it. I mean, you do you, right? I mean, you do what works for your organization. For us going off a booster tank doesn't happen. This is not something we have been indoctrinated to. Our experience kind of guides us towards. Typically for us, it's the first due it lays out, the second due picks up the water, the third gets the secondary water, fourth picks up that water. So we always typically have 2 water supplies, and we're always able to surround a building with the Alpha and Charlie, or geographically how it's set up. But again, it's because that works for us, and because of geographically where we are with our staffing, the amount of people we get there pretty swiftly, that we go to that. And I think to your point is, when I first came into the department 25 years ago, I mean, the little more cowboy antics that we saw, like racing to get there, that has been gone for eons. And I think that's been gone, and you can eliminate that because, to your point, it's a lack of operational discipline, but also it's because we don't explain the why. And when we educate our members and get them to understand why it's so important you take this role, and get them to change mentality, is that your arrivals and getting there is not about you. We're there for them. And so for us to have the best outcome for them, if you were going to change your run order, and we have very strict operational doctrine when it comes to that, is that if you want to add on to a call, you're changing the run order. That battalion chief, that first arriving battalion chief, is the one who orchestrates all that, because ultimately he's responsible for all of it. And so he's the one that has the final say on, hey, if I arrive here and I'm clearly in front of that other engine, then I'll lay out and we'll be able to get water on fire. But, and some of it comes down to the way you operate. Like, I know when I came to Fairfax in 95, it was often different, right? I mean, like, the driver never laid out. We had a layout man when I came out before there. But our driver lays out because he's dressed like we are right now. He doesn't have turnout gear on. It's not cumbersome. And typically where our hydrants are located, that last couple seconds when the driver hops out, wraps a hydrant, and gets back in, the officer is able to see the structure, start to develop what he wants to say on his own scene report, and before he leaves that cone of silence, give some last orders to the guys or girls in the back to say, hey, it looks like we got fire number 2 floor, whatever the case may be. So for us, and again, we have some experience where an engine decided not to lay out and went for the rescue, and it didn't add favorably. Because, we look back, and I go back to it when we say we explain the why. We put it into our operational doctrine. And manuals don't solve all the problems. All they really are legacy documents to say, this is what we've learned. This is the way we're going to operate. Here's our blueprint for success. So for us, knowing the facts, right? Every 64 seconds in the United States, we go to residential building fires. The vast majority of the line of duty deaths and close calls we see occur in the residential. That the best bring to a fire is to put water on that fire. So how do we best ensure that we have that continuous water supply? Again, it's because it works for us. But that's not to say every single one of our books is the same. For the single family dwellings and townhouses, we typically operate this way. First lays out, second picks up the water. High rise is a little bit different. Our strip shopping centers, still similar, but the second engine has an ultimate responsibility to make sure that they can supply the FDC if it's present. So we try to take all that and feed it into what the second due engine, but their primary responsibility in our county is that you are going to ensure that continuous water supply for that first due engine. And if that means, hey, look, they missed it. Because I was a driver for many years. And when I hear people on the radio say, hey, we're going to hand jack to this hydrant, that typically means one of two things. You can't read a map book or you hate your driver. Because trying to hand jack 4-inch line anywhere up a street to a hydrant is always difficult. But sometimes that second due engine has to pick it up. So to Darryl's point, we're very similar, is that your job is to make sure we're supporting what that first due engine officer has made as his tactical decision. We're operating offensive mode. We're stretching the hose line. So they get that taken care of.
So you have an engine, the first engine lays in like a wagon.
Mm-hmm.
Second engine, like Washington, D.C. used to have two-piece engine company. L.A. So, and then I just want to make sure I understand correctly. Your second due engine, the line is already laid. It's wrapped around the hydrant.
Mm-hmm.
It's left at the hydrant. Will connect directly with a direct suction to the hydrant.
No. So
like
we don't use a HUMAT or four-way valve. That is just the only thing that's in the layout pack is the LDHOs, a hydrant wrench, and so whatever they wrap around it. So when that driver gets there in a second due engine, throws that off, makes a quick connection off either his side intake or his front intake, and then he hooks up to his discharge and water is sent. Now what happens, and most, I'm sure it's true for all you guys.
That's at the hydrant. You're the second due company.
That's at the hydrant.
So the second due company does connect to the hydrant and pump the line that was laid to the first due.
Correct.
Okay. I know what the answer is going to be because I like that system. Let me ask you something. We're going to say engine one and engine two. Engine one's first in, lays in a line, and is operating on the fire. Engine two connects the supply line from engine one, connects to the hydrant directly, taking full advantage of the available water of the hydrant, not depending upon hydrant residual pressure because you can boost it with the pump. Mm-hmm. Now, Dan, engine one takes a dump. Engine one takes a dump. Is it a big problem?
No. I mean, because of our close proximity where our hydrants are.
Well, what can engine two do?
That can be this. That can be the attack engine.
Absolutely, yeah. Engine one becomes a big manifold if your intake relief valves are not set too low.
No, and a lot of times, Bill, what happens is that first engine lays out, second supplies them. They're operating off their booster tank for a while. I mean, because we have 175, 185 GPM nozzles. The vast majority of the time, we're not going to be flowing water for. I mean, it's going to take a minute or two for them to make the stretch to get to the room. They open the nozzle and they start putting water on fire. So a lot of it is all safeguards. That if something, to your point, line one takes a dump, they pull the second line, they pull a 2.5. Now we're trying to flow 400 or 500 gallons per minute off a 750 tank. And we wonder why we run out of water. We have the safeguards. But to your point, like if we lose that water supply, that second due engine becoming the attack engine, just because typically the close proximity of our hydrants, we're close enough they can make the stretch. Our personnel know how to stretch long lines. And when we mandate 2 water supplies in every single fire we go to, that third and fourth are going to get a secondary water supply. They might be coming in on side Charlie, might be coming in a different part of the block because it's the other thing we really want to preach is those later arriving companies should not take the same exact response route as the first and second. And so you're listening like, hey, first engine one laid out from here. Mm-hmm. Engine two picked it up. Engine three, hey, we're going to go around the block and come in this way and hit this other plug.
And that's why Chicago announces their direction. We had some input from one of our viewers about hand laying line. Brother, I agree with you. When we're going into an area, for instance, heavy industrial, where I'm pretty confident we got a hydrant every 300 feet. Get a hydrant every 300 feet, man. It's going to be a piece of cake. Your driver engineer, as Dan says, our drivers are going to be dressed in their station uniform, which makes them a lot more agile. Laying 200 feet of 5-inch or 200 plus feet of 4-inch or 3-inch shouldn't be a problem if the guy's in shape. And how Chicago takes advantage of that is that they got a hydrant every 300 feet. You're never going to be more than 150 feet away. So they accordion load. I could be wrong on this, and if somebody from the Chicago area is watching, please correct me. I'll stand corrected. But the last time I checked, they accordion load 150 feet of large diameter supply on their front bumper so that they're not stretching from the back of the rig around to the front if the hydrant happens to be closer than the front. So, Sam, any thoughts on second engine?
Yeah, we actually operate a lot like Oakland does. I think you can do a lot with the second engine, particularly if you have some resource issues or delays in engines coming together, kind of like we do. So, you know, we fight off the tank. We know that there's a known life hazard at every fire, and that's us. So we put water inside at the very least for confinement to protect the search as a minimum. And I know a lot of my friends, particularly on the East Coast, would disagree with that. But, you know, like Chief Shaw said, that's how we do it. That's us. So the second due engine, we typically reverse off of about everything. We reverse off, and then we'll announce to the truck if there's any problems for them to come in as far as direction. If we have a commercial or high rise or anything like that, what that does is that ultimately, or apartment, I'm sorry, not high rise, but that allows us to actually get a pumper hookup there. We have a engine down there. It also allows us, when we pull up in front of the fire building, we can drop off the firefighters in the back. They can be assigned to stretch exposure lines, get a second line ready to go in when we get some more resources, or they can assist that first line. So we have some options to make sure that the first line gets in place and that we don't get out of control. Then the officer will hop off and they become the initial incident commander. And when the battalion chief gets there, they take command. Then typically that officer can marry up with their firefighter and put a second line in service, or continue to help ensure that the first line gets put in service.
Sam, you're a reverse lane fire department then, correct?
For the most part, yes.
Okay, so you're using some kind of skid load like reverse horseshoes, something like that? I'm sorry, say it again?
Yeah, we pretty much pull everything off the back, static loads off.
Do you have any kind of skid load or something like you can pull off like a reverse horseshoe of 150 feet of 2.5 or something like that, where you can just drop it right at the on the street?
What we'll do is we pull up to the back and they will actually throw it under the, well, they'll pull up next to the engine and they'll throw it underneath the front or back tire. And
you're talking about the second due will do this?
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then the second due will connect directly to the hydrant.
On residential, we typically go straight to the hydrant, but commercial apartments,
you'll connect
for pumper hookup.
Okay. All right. And something else I wanted to ask you. Has the second due ever dumped their tank, quickly given it to the first due, or dumped it on the fire while they're getting ready to lay out to the hydrant?
That's not something we do. If we have hydrant issues, then we'll give them tank water. We'll 500, 600 gallons off of that engine. If we have a split lay or something like that, something that's going to be delayed, then we'll keep them off the tank. But again, those are things that have to be announced on the radio, because now we're asking guys to not be overly aggressive with the lines. They're going to know that they could have interrupted water.
Yeah. Hey, it's our halfway mark. I want to remind everybody this is a special Veterans Day edition of our Hangout. And for all you veterans out there, thank God for you. And that's why it'd be thanks to you and all the veterans that preceded you, because that's why we're in this wonderful country, and we're blessed to be able to have a discussion like this and voice our opinions. And we wouldn't be able to do it without our veterans. I also want to give a shout out to the training staff at Miami-Dade Fire Rescue Department. We bring each other up, fellas. We bring each other up. And my buddies, Ricky Stevens, Miguel Peralta, Juan, Miguel, and Pete Williams bring me up, and we all have our strengths. And for instance, Ricky is an excellent firefighter. He just participated in the over 40 or over 50 category at the Combat Challenge in Irving, Texas. I want to give a shout out to that. Also, I sent that video that he shot of the winner of this thing, a guy from Austin, Texas. Reminds me of you, Sam, a guy that's in incredible shape. So what they have there, guys, is they have the open category, and then they got above 40, above 50, and I think above 60. But that was amazing. But I'm Peter, if you're watching, I sent that to Bill Carey. It is amazing what this guy can do in this combat challenge. So I wanted to give a shout out to them. Again, I want to give a shout out to Key Hose. That's the hose that we use on Miami-Dade. And if you are fortunate enough to have Key, it's not like you develop a long-term relationship with these folks. And as problems and questions arise, they don't forget about you. It's not just one sale and that's over. They want to develop a long-lasting relationship with you. And there are a lot of good fire hose companies. It's just that my department is blessed to have purchased Key Hose, and no regrets. So a big shout out to Key. Again, a shout out to my buddies in the Palm Bay, Brevard County, Melbourne, Satellite Beach, and Cape Canaveral. You folks have your heart and your head in the job. Let me bring up an issue that my dad used to remember. Dyed-in-the-wool Chicago guy. Remember, a lot of the years that he was working, there was no booster tanks on apparatus, so they had to lead out, reverse lay, and it had to do with the second hose line. And he would say, Bill, what good is the second hose line or a backup line if it's coming off the same apparatus as the first line and that apparatus breaks down? Hard to argue with that logic. How would you answer that, Darryl?
Well, I think that's a perfect concern, and it's something we don't think about enough because modern fire apparatus aren't often, failing at the scene of incidents. But you have to have a way to back this up. Our neighbors here in San Francisco, they do just what Chicago do. That second engine backs down the block, lays out to the hydrant, hooks up that second due engine, and then they pump to the first due pumper. So you have two pumping apparatus if you reverse out that second engine. Sam is painting the same picture of what they do there in Wichita. In Oakland, we forward lay. It's not my favorite lay, but we forward lay most of the time, but we do use a HUMAT valve. And so we can have an engine company at the HUMAT if there were some incident. At least there's a pumper that can ready to be put in pump and take over. We don't want to have all our eggs in one basket where
Darryl,
just
for
have a
our
line connected
viewers,
to the hydrant.
the UMAT is a four-way valve. UMAT just happens to be one brand. Hydra Assist is another. Oasis is another one from TFT. For those of us that might not be familiar that are viewing this, could you explain what the principle is behind the four-way valve?
Yeah, and we've had all different brands and sizes and all that. You're right, that is just one of them. It's for fire departments that do forward lay as their primary way. So when the water comes out of the hydrant, goes through the valve, it's redirected down through the hose line to the pumping apparatus. There's some friction loss there, so you are hooking up some friction loss, but they're pretty good at that. But there's you'll see two other fittings on there, a female inlet and a male outlet. So when another company, and it could be, usually for us, it's like a second alarm company, they hook up to it. So then they take a line from the unused male outlet on the four-way and put it into their intake. And then they hook a line from a a discharge from their rig into the female intake of the four-way. And then you flip a handle that redirects the water from going directly from the hydrant to the hose line to the engine, where it goes to the engine that's hooked up to the four-way, through their pump, increases in pressure out of their discharge, and then through the four-way back to the first engine. So it's a way to have uninterrupted water supply and have the ability to increase pressure. But the side benefit is it's not just to increase pressure, it's also to add some redundancy in the system if there was a problem with the engine at the scene. Now, the beauty of reversing out a second engine over pumping in a four-way is, one, like Sam said, you're dropping your crew off. They're immediately able to help at the scene. You're bringing them to the front door. They're jumping off. They're helping with a second line, assisting with the first line. And it only takes one member now to reverse lay out to the hydrant. And you're hooking, rather than hooking that hose directly to the hydrant, you're hooking it to your discharge and then your front suction or a jumper line to the hydrant. So
Darryl,
you've added redundancy.
Backing down to the first?
It would be the same as backing down. Now, to pull up to the first engine, it's just going to require a wider street. But if you're dealing with an alleyway or a narrower street, you're going to have to back down.
And one of the beauties of backing down is identify the hydrant that you're going to take suction from and spin that cap off and make sure it's good. You've already identified your hydrant and you know that it's good. Back down. You have to be careful with backing down, of course. And two backers, they have to stay in the engineer's mirror at all time. And if the engineer is backing and at any time that he loses view of both of his backers, stop the rig. Stop it. Yes. Stop the rig so you don't run over your people. Then, do your engines have pre-connected front suctions?
We do not have front suctions, and that is primarily because we're not an agency that ever embraced a reverse lay. So we have jumpers on each side of the rig, and we usually use that.
Okay, with some type of intake relief valve, so you can start off your tank without, and then switch over to supply.
Yes.
Okay. Dan, any comments on that? Actually, the HUMAT originated in your
Baltimore County
area, correct, Dan?
Yeah, so I'm born, raised, and live in Baltimore, and that was two guys from Baltimore. Bob Hughes, who was an engineer, and Hurley Matthews, who worked in Baltimore County.
Now, Dan, every four-way valve has a direct shot. In other words, right from the hydrant steamer to the supply line. Now, the four ways that my department uses, when we are not supplementing the pressure, it's a straight shot through. Straight shot from the steamer, right straight on to the supply line. Now, when we switch over and allow water to go into the suction, we pump the other line and that opens up a clapper. And once we do that, that's a right angle. Now, does that have a lot of friction loss? Of course it does. But we're there to overcome that friction loss. My question to you was the intent of the UMAT, because if you operate the UMAT without pumping through it, you got a right angle. It comes down, correct? And then goes. Was it the intention of the UMAT to most of the time pump it?
I'll be honest with you, Bill. I started in Howard County, which is a suburb of Baltimore, and we used them there, but we haven't used them in years. And really, what I thought was a great benefit of that is that when you finished up at the fire, is the second new engine, you weren't stuck on the plug. You could just hit that valve up, disconnect, and go home. But I don't think that was the intention.
Yeah, I hear you, brother. And is there an off position on the UMAT?
Yeah, it used to. I mean, again, I haven't seen them in years, but yeah, it used to always have a handle that would close that valve. They'll allow you to change it to feed directly off the hydrant, like a gutter line, into the attack engine, or open it up, and now you're taking that water supply and now you're supplying back out to that engine.
Every couple of years, we won't be able to close a hydrant. And if you've got a valve that you can shut off, you're golden, man.
Yeah,
If not,
no.
then you're going to have a problem.
So to Darryl's point, I mean, I think and this is again when we talk about like the importance of line, to your original question, Bill, about if the first engine fails and your first line fails, you pull the second line off there. I mean, he's exactly right. I mean, it's a normalization of deviance. Nothing bad has ever happened to us in this situation because of how well constructed these vehicles are. We don't typically see that failure, so we don't have a need to change for it. But you're 100% correct. I mean, this is where, again, we kind of focus that operational discipline on, much like when we get to forcible entry. You don't get to a door, take your irons and try it. It doesn't work. You throw down the tools and say, all right, I'm done. You have a plan A through Z. So you try to preach to our personnel is like, you got to have a plan for everything to overcome it. You know, we ask all the time in class, how long is your cross leg? 200 feet. Why? Because every fire has always been 155 feet away? No, because it works for your area. But if you can't answer that question, you got to start thinking about, why do I carry what I carry? And does it work for what we have? You know, we have a 400-foot line that comes off the back. And we try to teach to our people, and I think they come up with some ingenuity on the fire ground. Your job is the fire always gets a vote. It can burn anywhere it wants to. It's going to go wherever it wants to. So you got to be able to overcome that. So you got to be able to make a 600-foot line or make a 350-foot line or whatever the case may be. But you better have multiple plans for it. And that really changed the mentality for our people. And it's semantics, right? We got rid of the language of backup line. And we changed the second line. So you didn't always think about, like, I have to pull this line to make sure I back up the first. No, you pull a second line that might perform a backup to the first line. But your goal is to make sure the first line is operational. Then you think about the second line, because two lines are too short or both useless to us.
Yes. And Dan, God rest his soul, I worked for a chief that spent 2 tours in the Marines in combat in Vietnam. And as second engine, once we got that supply line to the first engine, we would pull the second line and go to I'm talking about a dwelling now. And we would go to the rear. Now, almost always that second line is going to have to be longer than the first, because that's the one that's going to an exposure. That's the one that's going above. That's the one that's going to the rear. And in our situation was, we would go to the rear with that second line and stand fast. We could outside vent. We could force alternate means of egress, but we were there as a standby. If, because of the wind, or more than likely, the situation would be that the house was divided. This is a huge problem in immigrant communities where there's no outside indication that the house has been divided. And you can't get to the rear of that structure, that efficiency in the rear, through the front door. You got to go around to the rear. So this happens so often that our chief was proactive. Take the line around to the rear. All right. You're having difficulty, engine 7, finding the fire. Okay. Engine 2, come on in through the Charlie side. And it worked very smoothly. It was a smooth transition. And, we said, well, that's opposing streams. BS. If you have opposing streams that are operating from different positions and they're communicated and coordinated, I don't have a problem with that. You're not in a contest with each other. You each have a specific reason. Dan, I like that logic. I like that logic about quit calling it a backup line, just call it a second line.
Well, and to your point, Bill,
I couldn't agree more.
That's a lack of command and control if you're having opposing lines, because no one is clearly stating what the plan is, the strategy and tactics for what you're doing. And you hit on a key point that we stress over and over in training is, look, your first job as that first arriving engine officer is to locate the fire. And where do we get this point of like locate, confine, compartment, extinguish, right? We focus so much on the extinguishment effort. How about we focus on that, locate where the fire is, confine it, compartment it, which is exactly what you're talking about. Line here, line here, line here. Now put the fire out. Let's keep it contained to the trucks and rescues, and Sam can go to award days when he pulls someone out on his little rescue.
Right. Well, that Sam is a little insecure. And maybe there's just a little bit too much praise to our brother Dan today, but Sam, we could totally I was going to wait later, Sam, but
I had no idea you could read.
let me compliment you on something, Sam. I always look forward to whatever hat you're going to wear. But I have to tell you, Sam, I have feelings too, and I get insecure. So, not to be outdone, I got this for you, Sam. Okay? Gustin, all right? And I can tie it around my chin here. It's actually on backwards, you know that. But, Sam, if you'd like, I could get you one of these. It would say Gustin on it, but I would appreciate the advertising. And then if you want, you can like snap it up like this, like an Aussie. Or
Yes.
I
It's
could
like a
put a
fashion
bronze
show.
end into it. But Sam, listen, we love you. Here, let me see here. How does that look? Excellent, huh?
What was that cowboy's name from Toy Story? That's what you look like.
Woody.
Woody.
I want to quote Mike Dugan with something. We all operate a little bit differently. And Captain Mike, who's at a Veterans Day function right now, and that's where he needs to be, has a great saying. Darryl, you don't have to be wrong for me to be right. I don't have to be wrong for you to be right, Darryl. There's a reason why each department does what they do. And as long as they've given it some thought, like for instance, I will never recommend the size diameter of hose for standpipe operations to any department other than my own. Now, do I recommend that each department do their homework? Look at their systems. Are they dry? Are they well maintained? The age of their buildings? Are they sprinklered, compartmented? All of those are factors that I don't know, that I have no control over. So I'm not going to recommend any size hose to you, and I'm not going to recommend any size configuration or layout of that hose. That's up for you to decide. But what I am saying is you better have some kind of plan, and you better have a rational reason based on research and training and development why you do the things that you do. And just because the neighboring department does it doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you. However, having said that, you do have to worry about your neighboring departments when it comes to interoperability. Dan Shaw, for instance, had a big hand in the Northern Virginia regional high-rise plan. Correct, Dan? Another compliment for Dan. Okay.
Well, I can't take credit. Look, we've had interoperability and automatic aid with 14 departments in 75.
Okay.
And
So
it comes down to all the
having
manuals.
said that, you don't do what the other department does. There's certain situations where you need to know what the other departments are doing. And if they are on automatic aid, there's very few departments in the United States that can handle a significant high-rise fire by themselves. So you're going to have help, and you're going to have the same terminology, the same tactics, and interoperability with hose threads, and some type of interoperability with the way that you're deploying the hose. Let's don't mistake that with just configuring your apparatus or buying equipment based upon what the big city next door is doing. So Sam, as a squad, when you're rolling in as a squad, are you ever just a tactical reserve that stands by and perhaps is not deployed, or is then subsequently given an order based upon something that may be unforeseen? So you're actually a tactical reserve to the incident commander?
Depending on the incident commander and depending when we come in. So the residential fire we had yesterday had a room over a double car garage. We're second due. We know that it's a garage fire. They announced they don't have a man door to the garage except for the interior.
Mm-hmm.
So when we come in, I just announced to the incident commander, hey, we've got your saws. We can open that up for you. We don't tell them what we're going to do. We kind of suggest it. They say, yeah, get that thing opened up. And then we ended up getting a truck assigned to us and being in charge of opening up and getting vertical ventilation. So then I started coordinating with truck one to make that happen. If we come in really late to something, then we will just announce that we're on their scene and ask them where they need help. We really are a resource to be plugged in wherever they're having problems or wherever they think we can be best utilized. My battalion chief, he, regardless of order, he's pretty much told us on commercial buildings, we will be opening up and softening that structure for them.
Yeah, and we talk about, well, the life hazard, you see who's calling me. You know, I have legions of adoring females that won't leave me alone. We're in the middle of a hangout. But I'm not a big fan of large area search. To me, if it's a commercial, even if it's an assembly, people are aware there's a fire. The reason that they're trapped in that nightclub, in that illegal nightclub, is that every door other than the front entrance door, where they're checking IDs and in some neighborhoods frisking you, they're locked, blocked, barred. So if you're going to have people trapped like cordwood at doors, it's going to be because you're going to have to get to the outside, get around to the sides and the rear with saws, very saw intensive, and get those friggin' doors open. Now, the reason I asked about that, that's in the finest traditions of squad companies. I have logbooks, Sam, from my dad's time on Squad 2 in the 50s, before they had radios. And in the finest of fire department traditions, they would respond on a box number and report to the chief of 5th or 6th Battalion. And most of the entries were standby. But then there were those entries stood by, reported to the chief of the 6th Battalion, ordered to take a 35-foot ladder and put it up to the 3rd floor for engine 39 to evacuate, or take a second line off of engine 28. So do you ever take a second line, third line, if you're on the squad?
I haven't so far. Our engine companies, we started to develop a culture where engine companies take pride in engine work and truck companies take pride in truck work. For the most part, we generally get assigned ventilation, opening up, or search.
Yeah.
Those are the three prominent things we do.
Yeah. Now, you ever make like a small triangle, if you got a lot of fire behind a garage door, overhead door, you ever make a small triangle and shove the nozzle in first and knock down the fire and then go about the business of making a firefighter size opening?
No, if it's a low enough door, then what we'll do is we'll just stick a roof hook or a Halligan up on the top of the overhead door and just kind of pry down on it and open that up, kind of give it a little bit of a horseshoe.
Okay. So do you use the Halligan as a fulcrum and then use the roof hook to pry up the bottom of the door?
Yeah, actually we did that on both doors yesterday, so we don't have to make the triangle at the very bottom. But
yeah, okay.
Coming in at the top of the garage and just bending that down a little bit,
yeah,
that allows them to actually get some water for its space, bounce things. One thing
I know you got tornadoes in Wichita, Kansas, but no hurricanes, because we would never be able to do that in Miami-Dade and South Florida.
Your wind bracing is significant, and we're not going to be able to do that on our larger doors, particularly if they're older. Older commercial doors had more substantial wind bracing to carry the length of the door. The engineering now, we can have some small diameter wind bracing and still have a 20-foot door.
Yeah.
It just depends on where you're at. One thing I would like to back up on, and
we got time, brother. Go ahead.
Is this one of the benefits to that second due engine taking that initial command for us is when they do get assigned to be fire attack, if they end up being fire attack group leader, it bodes to exactly what you said in the beginning. The first line inside can't always see the true conditions. They have limited visibility. They may not be able to see the extension. And so what that allows that second engine to do is actually get a full assessment of where that second line needs to be, or where that first line needs to try to get.
You know, Sam, there's two size ups that happen on every fire, must happen on every fire, inside and outside. And if they are not in agreement, somebody's got it wrong. So somebody's got it wrong. It's usually the company inside. To what you're saying, when I was teaching in up the state here, they have walk-through pump compartments. And the main reason they have the walk-through pump compartments is when that first arriving pump engine is there operating by themselves. When the line goes in, let's say the front door, the only set of eyes there is the engineer at the pump panel, and he can see, or she can see, the building. Now, what are they looking for? They're looking for a progressively lowering of the neutral plane. They're looking for an increase in velocity and pressure of the smoke, things that the company operating inside on their hands and knees in limited visibility or zero visibility don't see. So that is their number one reason. It's not to keep them out of the ice or snow or anything. There is no ice or snow. It also allows the engineer direct access to the deck gun right there. So I never thought about that. So we were teaching a class west of Fort Lauderdale in Sunrise. They have side mounted pump panels, and on their new pumpers, they have a camera mounted on the right side of the apparatus so that the engineer at the pump panel is looking at a screen and looking at the fire building. Same concept, outside eyes. So Sam, I'm with you, man. And you know, Mike Dugan will be the first one to tell you. He said it publicly and privately. You know, they don't do that in New York City. Everybody has their assigned tasks and they do that. To quote Mike, to have a first arriving company officer take charge and being physically involved in some type of action, you're setting the poor guy or girl up for failure. You actually are. That's mental overload, man. So I like your concept of having that second due company take command pending the arrival of a greater chief. Now, if I'm taking command as a second due company, you better believe I'm conversing with that first due company. If I'm second due company, an engine, I want to know, was the first line stretched? And if not, why wasn't it? And it's usually because they need a hand. They've got multiple corners, they stretch short, multiple obstacles, multiple parked cars. They need a hand. So first and foremost, and hey, FDNY has 5 people on an engine. They'll not hesitate to team up 2-3 engine companies to get that first critical line into operation. And Darryl,
Hey, Bill.
Yes, sir.
So can I add one thing to the command thing? Because I mean, obviously, I don't get the privilege of what these guys get to do every day, riding that right front seat of an engine. And you're 100% correct. The commander's intent for all our personnel is always there should never ever be a gap in command. We can't have a gap in command. Now, how we execute that is obviously dependent upon a fire. I mean, a fire is a dynamic situation. You got to have the dynamic decision making. So when a first engine arrives, yes, they have command until they are relieved of command, but they might be in command of themselves if it's a single engine house. And so, what our system, how it works for us is that battalion chief, while he's not in command, he has a level of intervention that he has to impose on the incident because he is going to be in charge of that incident when he gets there. So it's incumbent upon him when that first engine calls, the end of their on-scene report is a command statement. Request to transfer command, or I'm establishing command. Defensive action, he can have command until the chief gets there. They're making a stretch going down a hallway. Chief, I'm being engaged and need to transfer command. The chief decides, hey, I want the second to take it. In some cases, our third does, because our third is responsible for side Charlie. That guarantees 2 lines in place. The third is quickly arriving there with the second. But the overarching theme I can give you from my perspective is we can never, ever have a gap in command. It's a top 5 in every line of duty death is a lack of command and control. And to your point, the points is always make sure that the strategy and tactics match what you see and what you hear. So when our first engine calls me, Darryl calls and says, I got the fire knocked, and I still see fire blown out of 2 windows, they're not matching because he can't see that because he's in zero visibility. And that's where incident commanders, whatever your rank is, you have to be an incident commander. You got to have command presence. You got to make sure you have strategy and tactics to apply, regardless if you're a captain or lieutenant or you're a chief officer. But yeah, I just wanted to share because it really is just such a important part to me of when we understand our operations is that command it's not as sexy as doing a search and pulling hose lines, but it's so vitally important to what we do.
Now, clearly, there are times that the first arriving company should take a command position, which means mobile command. Climb up on the roof of the apparatus for a point of view. That would be an MCI, multiple casualty incident, a emerging hazmat operation, or the apartment complex that is beyond the suppression capabilities of the first alarm assignment. It's already a conflagration. Definitely, there's times that you're going to have to take command with that. But again, whatever a department does has to be done by thought and figuring it out and in your own situation. The longer a company has to operate by themselves, the greater the possibility they're going to have to take command. Somebody's got to be informing these companies. Now, I've got another question, Dan. Do your chiefs have drivers?
I do. As an ops deputy, the battalions do not. So it's very taxing for them to try and navigate traffic, listen to communications, and then try to make some assessment of it.
It is. And that's a shame.
Yeah.
My chiefs don't either, but that is a shame. And it's not like the public thinks that they're like somebody's chauffeuring around the chief.
Yeah.
It's allowing the chief to become engaged in the incident before he or she gets on the scene.
Intervention, right?
Facing that MCU, looking at pre-fire plans, looking at the run assignment. It's really sad. How about you, Sam? Do your chiefs have a driver?
We don't, and I don't think we're going to get them anytime soon, even though we recognize the need for them. Chief Riley and Chief Schultz, I don't want to mess up their statistic, but I believe they point out that 60% of fatalities end up because of task saturation at the command level, whereas they're missing radio traffic, and having a chief driver does exactly that. It lets you have a better assessment of what's going on. It allows you to manage your component of that and allows that chief's driver to help with radio control or go do face-to-face. So we definitely recognize the need for it, but particularly right now, I think we're 21% of our cities contracting COVID right now. So all of our hospitals are full. The aircraft industry is not going to recover anytime soon. And that is our primary bread and butter here. So we're not going to get them.
Yeah. Darryl, do your chiefs have drivers?
I believe it was 1986 when we lost our chief's drivers. And it's a shame because our last line of duty death on the fire ground, it was listed as a factor and a recommendation to have chief's drivers. And I just think, not enough fire departments really value it because we have so many members that were not part of their organization when we had drivers.
Yeah.
And I remember I met Andrew Fredericks one time in 2001. He came to our training tower and did did a talk, and it had me thinking kind of on this topic. A member talked about the staffing levels, how they have such high staffing, and he says people think of New York City as a department that has very high staffing, but we've merely retained what most cities had. And when I think of that, it is very true. It's true for us, and I think that most cities did have drivers, and we lost it, and we did have more people on the engine. We had more battalions or trucks.
Yep.
I want to roll back and talk about a couple things on this second due engine topic, and that is talking about the command, and goes along with chiefs not having the support they need, or a lot of cities not having battalions close enough to where their fires are. Our second due engine generally does take command until the arrival of the chief. However, there is a factor there. You have to have a crew that can work, somewhat independently. I can't have two probationaries in the back, or, at roll call, I'm telling the chief, hey, if we're second due, I got two probies today, and, basically that's not going to happen, because our engineers helping that first due engineer. And if I need them to, get a line here or there, or do something independently, I'm not going to be able to do that. So I may just have them, like I said, just assisting that first due engine. But on an occasion, if the first due engine, hey, they have maybe a short stretch, they got one line and we just need another line backed up, or maybe a line going to the floor above. I don't want to have just two, non-experienced members doing that on their own. The other thing is, how are we talking to them on the radio? And every organization will have something a little different. Now, I'm on engine 13. If I become command and I say we're international command, I'm establishing international command, I'm naming my crew engine 13 until I'm relieved by the battalion chief, because we have to make this very clear. And I told them that, hey, guys, I'm in command, you're engine 13 until I come back to them. And then once the chief takes that command, I become engine 13, and then they're back to, we assign hydrant and nozzle in the morning. So they're back to, nozzle 13, lead off 13 is what we call them. So make that very clear. The other thing that I think is, I do want to reiterate what Dan said about the backup fire attack terminology. I never liked that as a company officer. I thought it was very non-specific. If someone says your backup fire attack, that can mean many things, but it doesn't let command absolutely know what they're doing. Backup fire attack could be you're stretching a second line to behind the first line. It could be that you just have your staffing supporting the first line. To others, it may be that you're stretching a line to the floor above, or somewhere, or to an exposure. If whatever you want them to do, be very specific about what you want them to do. Engine 13, upon your arrival, we need a second line to the floor above. Now you know what they do, and there's no question to them of what their tasks are. But the backup fire attack terminology is vague enough to cause miscommunication.
All right. I'm glad that we addressed that. We're going to wrap this thing up. Chief Dan, any final thoughts?
I just want to give all the praise and attention to Sam, because he feels like he hasn't got enough. No, great conversation as always. I always come back to what we talked about here before, right? Like, here you have collective 4 different fire departments that do things similar, but just a little bit different. Anyone who's listening and watching this, you do what works for you. When I get to teach with Doug and he's got, 85 guys on a ladder truck, you can't do what they do. And, some departments can't do what we do, but you find the core, principles of what we do and see if you can apply it and at least generate the conversation. I think it goes back to what you said, Bill, is at a minimum, what we always want is thinking firefighters, because the fires we go to are dynamic, and we have to be dynamic in our decision-making. And you got to have something to pull from that's based upon experience and knowledge and the wisdom you get from others. So again, another great conversation. Love to share with you guys, and most importantly, learn from each other.
Great. Sam, any final thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I hope that as a fire service, we don't disagree on the objectives. We just are going to disagree on how we get there. I love what Captain Dugan says, and I think that's spot on. But I also really like what you kind of hit on a little bit earlier, is you got to understand the pros and cons to what you do. There's not a perfect system, but if you truly evaluated it, you can say that their system works great because of this, and it doesn't work so great because of that. Our system we chose because of this, but we understand when we do that, we're giving up this.
Yeah. And Sam, why don't you, do you have any pointers? Because I know that you are a subject matter expert on, we got Thanksgiving coming up. And so I know that, you know, you're kind of a country guy if you're in Kansas. So you got any pointers on frying turkeys, Sam? Because I know you do it.
I'll tell you what, I try not to leave the city unless it's on an airplane. I don't like the country. I like the city.
Yeah. Well, I really think that most of your turkey frying incidents may be because of operator error because of impairment. I actually think.
I do know this, even though we don't do it. You're supposed to fill it up with water first.
Yeah.
And find your grease line, then pull the turkey out and fill it with grease.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is no joke. So I'm lucky. I'm going to go spend Thanksgiving with my son, and he is an expert at it, and it's wonderful. So just a shout out again to my buddies, my brothers at Key, Mark Lighthill and Dave Hibben from DCFD, Engine 10. And I want to thank you for your continuing advice, professional advice, and your support of Miami-Dade Fire. And my buddies on the Space Coast there, Brevard County, Melbourne, Satellite Beach, and Cape Canaveral. I tell these guys, I hope this is politically correct. I tell these guys, when I become your friend, it's like herpes. My friendship never goes away. Now, you may think it goes away, but then it'll flare up every once in a while when you're under stress. Was that okay, Sam? Quite eloquent.
I think you're legitimately grandfathered into saying whatever.
I'm just impressed with your medical knowledge of herpes.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so guys, and one reason I'm thankful on Thanksgiving is because of being able to participate with you wonderful guys. And our buddies that are not here today, Clark Lamping, Jason Hobelman, and Captain Mike D. So you can't make it every month, guys. Don't worry about that. I also want to thank our friends that participated and with the hashtags online. So until next month, have a safe, happy, healthy Thanksgiving. And may God bless and keep you safe in our most noble of professions.